When it comes to game development, there's no shortage of creators wanting to get their vision out to the world. While many of these ideas will no doubt be ambitious, a majority will realize that certain aspects need to be dialed back. This is especially true for a developer's debut work, usually hindered by a lack of budget, assets, or any number of obstacles. A tremendous amount of trial and error takes place, requiring various concepts to be left on the cutting room floor. Determining the essentials can prove difficult, but if done successfully, the end result has the potential to impress a variety of players. Despite what was left behind, people can still appreciate the game for what it is. In the best case, a large number of fans will support the developer, allowing for a series to push the creator's world even further. Adaptations may also allow them to revisit older works, finally having the opportunity to put everything they initially wanted into the project. However, those early restrictions are sometimes a blessing in disguise. This reimagining can provide creative freedom that was previously lacking, but it could also introduce new problems. Namely, those personal preferences may serve to alienate part of the fan base. Should an artist be forced to stick to what's already been established as a hit? Are they allowed to make changes that suit their own taste? Is it worth doing this? Welcome to Corpse Party PC-98 edition. Corpse Party is a series of indie horror games with a number of different entries. Most people are familiar with Blood Covered, now having multiple versions to play through. Acting as the starting point for everything, this is where the iconic cast is introduced. Also being the source of the most important lore in general, it's no wonder why this game is so beloved by the fans. However, what a lot of people may not be aware of is that an even earlier entry became the foundation for the success of Blood Covered. All the way back in 1898, the Japanese NEC Corporation was established by a small group of founders. Dealing with electronic and telecommunication devices, the company continues to do business even now. Personal computers became their focus in the early 1980s, eventually resulting in development of the PC-9800 series, or PC-98 for short. By 1991, the PC-98 was the main system in use by the Japanese market. Meant more for business applications, the computer gradually became more versatile, being further utilized for educational purposes and even unique hobbies. One of these activities would be introduced roughly halfway into the machine's lifespan. In late 1992, a program known as RPG Maker Dante 98 was made available by a group known as the ASCII Corporation. Intended for home use, the software allowed anyone to design a computer game of their very own. ASCII already had a computer magazine in circulation, but to cater more to the growing computer game market, they released another regular publication going by Login Softcom. Promoting their RPG Maker within the pages of each issue, they made it a point to feature amateur submissions sent by aspiring game developers. Hosting annual competitions, the company would award the winners with a nice sum of money. In early 1996, a 22-year-old college student going by Makoto Kedowin would have his game published in the magazine. The name of the entry was Corpse Party. Doing very well in the ranking, Kedowin managed to get second place, earning himself a 5 million yen prize. The game received a fair amount of praise, going on to get a cult following years after its release. Roughly a decade later, a nameless user of a Japanese message board remade the entire game from scratch. Using the more advanced RPG Maker XP, the assets received a very impressive overhaul, improving environmental textures, sprites, and character portraits. In 2012, the American fan translation group Memories of Fear found the project, allowing Western Corpse Party fans to play it for the first time. Before I move on, I realize that some people may not be familiar with certain story elements of the series. I'll be drawing comparisons to the newer version of Blood Covered throughout, so if you'd like some additional context, I'll have my previous discussions linked as a card for your convenience. Naturally, as this is the first iteration of Corpse Party, a number of changes will be apparent. For those accustomed to the characters of the mainline series entries, you may notice that the cast of the original game is a bit smaller. Mayu, Morishige, and Seiko are completely absent this time around. As there's no teacher present during the school festival preparations, Miss Yui isn't here either. That leaves us with a group of 5. From left to right, we have Naomi, Satoshi, Yuka, Yoshiki, and Shinozaki. A few exceptions aside, the characters look quite a bit different. Their behavior has changed in certain places too. Much like Blood Covered, you have the option to navigate a small room to learn more about the cast. Satoshi's demeanor is more or less the same, but there's an additional note that mentions a power struggle with Naomi. Looking at her details, it states that she and Satoshi don't get along as well as they could, to the point of being antagonistic on a regular basis. As her Blood Covered intro has a similar line, the girl is just as much of a tsundere here as she was was there. Unsurprisingly, Yuka hasn't changed much between the two games. The same goes for Shinozaki, still telling her classmates plenty of unsettling stories. Yoshiki continues to be straightforward with the people around him, though instead of mentioning certain friends he cares about, the description simply mentions him going with the flow. As far as the gameplay goes, everything functions more or less the same. Movement allows you to both walk and run, mostly letting the player take things at whatever pace they'd like. Examining background elements will provide a decent amount of flavor text, though due to limitations, descriptions will get repeated across similar set pieces. Different items can be discovered around the environment, allowing for general progress through the story when used appropriately. While most of these can just be picked up, loose boards are a strange exception, requiring the player to walk into them to trigger a prompt. Spirits can be found here and there, with some giving advice, others offering war points, and a few that are openly hostile. Exploration is the main focus, keeping it in line with the rest of the series. The music composer known for his exceptional work actually contributed here, and the inspiration for future tracks can be heard throughout the game. Outside of an important story encounter, obstacles are mostly kept to a minimum. You may recall a certain hallway in the third chapter of Blood Cover that contains a strange green essence. Walking across it slowly damages you, being the only instance in the game where HP is a factor. This odd substance can be found while wandering the halls of the original, scattered in some places and completely blocking others. Although this acts as a good deterrent to keep the player on track early on, a certain item quickly makes the danger obsolete. Checking the menu, most of the features are pretty standard fare. However, magic is now a factor, with each character having different values. This gets used later on, so I won't spoil things just yet. This entry also functions close to the Chapter 5 finale segment of Blood Covered. Using pentagrams on the floor, the player can switch from one team to the other as they check different areas of the school. These are the things you can expect to see outside of the story, but as we go forward, you'll notice both new and familiar parts here as well. Jumping into the game, we're met with a scary story being told on a stormy night. Mentioning a former student falling to her death at their school, Shinozaki recalls a haunting detail about the supposed corpse. Leaving select parts of her body behind, the girl disappeared, never to be seen again. A scream interrupts the storytelling, quickly being attributed to Satoshi. Turning the lights on, Naomi is ready to get back to work on preparations for the school festival. Despite a few minor grievances, the group does their best to complete the remaining tasks. Without warning, the lights go out, being followed by a knock at the classroom door. As the lights come back on, Satoshi's sister Yuka is revealed to be the mysterious visitor. Offering to help everyone out, the young teen joins the others in their activities. Continuing with the work, a strange voice eventually rings out across the room. Listening closer, the students can hear music being played in the background. Getting curious, the group leaves the class, ready to investigate the source. However, before they can, the teens get caught in a sudden earthquake. Waking up a little later, Satoshi finds himself in a pitch-black room. Lighting a nearby candle, the student is met with unfamiliar surroundings. Gradually regaining themselves, it only takes a moment before everyone reunites. Reading a nearby newspaper, Yuka reveals that they've all somehow been warped back to the past. Briefly panicking, the teens decide the best course of action is to explore, knowing there must be an exit somewhere. Splitting into two groups, Yuka sticks with her brother, while Yoshiki volunteers Naomi to go along with them. Pairing up with Shinozaki, the remaining guy reassures her that everything will be fine. Declaring a meeting time, the teams are set, officially starting the game. Stopping in the hall just outside of the room, Yuka gives her good luck charm to Satoshi, worried for his safety. Using a loose board, the trio heads south, making their way upstairs. Discovering the remains of a body, the group begins to understand the danger they're in. The spirit of the deceased starts talking to them, realizing the teens are now in the same situation that he was. Being told their new location, the students learn learn that they've been trapped inside of a completely different dimension. Alluding to his current condition, the body states how their present company is at least a slight consolation before death. Wondering why they were dragged here in the first place, the skeleton notes the presence of a powerful spirit, summoning people at random for an unknown reason. Encouraging the trio not to give up, the remains vanish, becoming one with the school. Still shocked by this revelation, Satoshi snaps back to reality as his sister starts to panic. Taking the time to comfort her, the brother manages to impress Naomi with his sensitive approach. Switching over to Yoshiki's team, the duo gets ready to do their own investigation. Moving to the hall, an earthquake destroys the path leading south, forcing the two to head north instead. Checking a nearby room, the students get their own taste of despair as they find a different corpse. Noticing a dying message carved with desperation, the formerly living person warns them to avoid reading a certain poster. Deciding to look further back, the teens hear the room's opening shut behind them. Looking for the exit, the two discover proof of a struggle on the backside of the door. With nothing else to lose, the duo checks the poster, realizing they've been set up. As the message warps with each viewing, tension starts to rise. Shinozaki becomes progressively more frantic, lamenting the terrible circumstances she's now stuck with. Taking it personally, Yoshiki makes an accusatory statement in regards to her feelings towards Satoshi. Matching his anger, Shinozaki fires back, now wanting her last moments to be with the rude person in front of her. Shifting back to Satoshi's group, the young man notices another poster on the wall containing a seemingly unimportant message. Heading back downstairs, the trio observes the damage, cutting them off from the others. Reclaiming the loose board from before, the teens repurpose it elsewhere, granting them access to a different area. Carefully navigating around a strange substance, a key is found sitting in an old piece of furniture on the second floor. Returning to the first hallway they searched, the students can now access one of the locked rooms. Encouraged to take a leap of faith by a nearby note, everyone bravely walks across a large gap in the floor to acquire an item. Finding 5 pairs of blessed shoes, the use is no longer an issue, as the footwear allows safe passage over it. Walking to the end of the hall, a more violent spirit is found camping outside of the room that Yoshiki and Shinozaki went into. Enjoying the misery they're experiencing, the apparition doesn't plan to leave anytime soon. Going on to locate a small infirmary, seasoned corpse party fans know how dangerous this particular room tends to be. Lucky for the characters, this iteration is completely harmless, allowing them to recover with a quick nap. Taking a look inside of the desk drawer, an odd crystal is pocketed for the time being. Approaching the ghost with a new item, the group is met with a very different reaction. Getting closer, the spirit dissipates, causing the crystal to fall apart. It seems the apparition was the one controlling the door, as it immediately opens after the previous encounter. Supposedly being the victim from the earlier message, the remains vanish, as its spirit has been released. Replacing the former note with something far more petty, the small room's poster leaves the pair with some parting words. The two may be free again, but the things said during their fight still linger. Regardless, the search continues, coming to a halt as blood splatters a nearby window. Not sure what to make of this, the strange event keeps them from noticing a more recognizable apparition moving into the room behind them. Checking the newly opened area for themselves, the team arrives in the science lab. Briefly looking around, they're caught off guard as the anatomical model warps a little closer. It doesn't take long before the creature actively starts chasing them, forcing the player to safely navigate back out of the room. Narrowly escaping, the duo goes back to bickering with each other, tired of these stressful situations. Unfortunately, there's no time to rest, as the model continues its pursuit. Dashing up the stairs, the pair gets blocked as the aggressor remains close behind. Managing to outmaneuver the creature, the two run elsewhere to get some distance. However, upon returning to the stairs, the model has disappeared, and the former damage has been repaired. Finding a loose board for their trouble, the team goes on to discover a room that feels very familiar. Before they can verify anything, the teens are launched back into the hall, being blocked from entering again. Reuniting a little later, the two groups reconvene on the second floor. Exchanging information, everyone is disappointed to learn that minimal progress has been made. Putting this aside for the moment, Shinozaki makes an offhanded remark in regards to Naomi's partnership with Satoshi. Completely ignoring this, he takes the opportunity to give the pair the extra shoes they found. Getting back to the mission, Satoshi's group finds a new area with 2 bathrooms. While the boys' room is fairly normal, Naomi has a more unsettling time in the girls' room. Getting ready to head elsewhere, Yuka stops the other two, informing them that she needs to relieve herself. Going with his sister, Satoshi stands guard near the entrance to make sure nothing bad happens. Waiting outside, Naomi comes across a poster featuring a grim poem about a family. Contemplating the meaning behind this, her thoughts are cut short as the area goes dark, filling with spirits at a rapid pace. Back with Satoshi, the brother calls out to his sibling, but gets met with silence. This continues during a few more attempts until the girl finally responds, dispelling the young man's anxiety. Satisfied, Satoshi walks away, not noticing a strange occurrence behind him. Crying for help, Yuka claims that blood is rapidly filling the stall and the door won't open. Preparing to break his sister free, the brother then hears a loud scream from the hall, realizing that Naomi is also in trouble. Dealing with the problem at hand, Satoshi smashes against the door, being pushed away by an unknown force. The apparition from before shows her face, declaring that Yuka's death is all but guaranteed. Pleading for the ghost to stop, he's met with a rather extreme ultimatum. Agreeing to the proposition, the selfless answer only serves to aggravate the spirit. Not satisfied with this, the girl changes the approach, asking if Satoshi would die for Yuka regardless of the current danger. Done wasting time, the teen forcefully jumps onto the stall, reaching for his sister. Succeeding in the rescue, Satoshi doesn't notice the apparition quietly slip away. Gradually recovering, Yuka is grateful that her brother is so reliable. Surviving this ordeal, the siblings are more than ready to go back home. Returning to the hall, Naomi is nowhere to be seen, being replaced by ghosts with a cocky attitude. Heading further to the right, the girl is found lying unconscious. Regaining herself, Naomi recalls how the spirits that surrounded her only wanted to talk, giving information on the one in charge. Going on to hear an unknown girl's voice, the student faded quickly after. Inquiring about the stranger's appearance, Satoshi fills Naomi in on the recent happenings. Given special attention by her brother, Yuka perks back up, full of energy to keep exploring. Heading north, the group comes across a sturdy lever, taking it with them for later. Returning to the area where Naomi was found, the team is surprised to see that it's opened up even further. Shifting over to the other students, Yoshiki and Shinozaki look around some of the other rooms they haven't searched yet. After leaving a certain one, a specific class number splatters onto the chalkboard. Passing through a second time, the duo takes this as a sign to revisit the homeroom that was previously blocked off. Expecting a different result this time around, they're unfortunately pushed away like before. However, within moments, the teens are engulfed by a strange light, being warped somewhere else. Waking up in familiar surroundings, the pair somehow made it back home. Taking the time to examine other parts of the school, Yoshiki snaps to attention as Shinozaki screams out in fear. Charging into the class, the young man is met with a bizarre sight. Not only is the classroom breaking down, but the deadly apparition from the other dimension has appeared as well. Oddly, the girl's demeanor is completely changed, going on to talk about a specific memory from when she was still alive. As a student herself, the young woman was essentially a loner, enjoying the relaxing time after school when no one else was around. One day, her teacher came by to talk, concerned for the girl that preferred to be alone. Taking advantage of the situation, the educator went in for a kiss, hoping to go even further. Attempting to break free of his grasp, the student saw the man's true colors. Threatening to tell everyone about his actions, the teacher shut her down, confronting her with a harsh truth. Not sure what she did to deserve this treatment, the girl started to cry, wishing to be anywhere but there. Having felt a bit guilty, the man did his best to calm her down. Not having any of it, the young woman climbed onto the balcony of the third-floor walkway, trying to make her words more convincing. Scared by the teacher's approach, she panicked, losing her footing and falling to the ground below. Acting quickly, the man wanted to keep a lid on things, but got caught by the principal. With no other people around, the one in charge decided to become an accomplice to keep the school's reputation in check. Concealed by the rain, the duo proceeded to hide the body deep underground, preventing anyone from ever finding the girl again. Finishing the story, the young woman goes on to confirm that it was her fault the teens were brought to the school. Growing resentful towards humanity, the girl's spirit split in half. Acting as a pure embodiment of that malice, this new apparition is the real culprit behind the random summons. Despite the dominance held over the Nexus, the friendlier ghost discovered an opportunity to at least free some of the current victims. Unfortunately, this is the extent of her power, as the others have already had direct confrontations with the stronger half, preventing rescue. Shinozaki is still determined to save her friends, and after enough prodding, gets told that there may be a slim chance remaining. The only way to guarantee their freedom involves finding the spirit's original body and putting it to rest. However, the two are advised against carrying out this plan, as it'll most likely be a one-way trip. Knowing they can't back away, the pair is ready to use this new information to bring everyone home. Grateful to the teens who are willing to help, the girl respects their wishes, returning them to the school. Upon arriving, Shinozaki thanks Yoshiki for joining her, knowing he was reluctant to do so. Claiming she's just tough in general, the girl refutes this, still being worried about the task at hand. Before heading out, the spirit reappears, providing an important item for the journey ahead. Giving the statue to the others, the new plan is discussed. fast, with both teams set to begin searching for the girl's body. Checking the end of the hallway by the bathrooms, Satoshi's group uses the lever from before to access a different area. Moving through a narrow corridor, the trio enters a small room with 2 sculptures. Adding the marble statue to the one on the right extends the previous hallway even further back. Following the path for quite a while, the team eventually finds a lone door waiting at the end. Entering the tiny space, the spirit of the former principal pleads for help. The hateful apparition interrupts these desperate cries, ready to continue torturing the partner in crime. Breaking the ghost apart over and over, the girl has no intention of stopping until Satoshi interjects. Not appreciating the intrusion, the spirit's animosity gets turned towards the students, preparing to change her target if they stick around. Met with determination, the young woman gets serious. Destroying the floor, the girl vanishes, eager to dish out some punishment in the near future. Following this encounter, the group begins to lose their resolve, realizing how weak they are in comparison to the ruler of the Nexus. Nevertheless, the team presses on, discovering another statue in the principal's room. Placing this in the other sculpture's hands, both figures disappear, revealing a hidden door. Finding a piano key, the siblings learn that Naomi is actually familiar with the instrument. Dropping the subject entirely, the end of the scene makes for a nice comedic moment. Heading to the other side of the large area, the trio comes across a piano. As Naomi uses her expertise to play a song, a massive number of spirits suddenly emerge, attracted to the notes filling the emptiness of the school. Seeing just how many victims are present, the group sympathizes with the prisoners that have been trapped for countless years. Forming a path, the teens take another leap of faith, placing trust in their new guides. Shifting over to Yoshiki's team, the two make their way to the far southeast corner of the school, discovering an incinerator. Walking towards it, the friendly apparition appears before them, providing a key that opens a series of rooms. Backtracking a bit, the first location is home to a peculiar ribbon. At this point, all of the pieces are in place, but only if you manage to find specific messages that explain this. Throughout the game, certain notes can be read if you check cabinets around the school. The first one reveals the presence of the incinerator, while the next one mentions a button that needs to be pressed. The third appears to be somewhat incomprehensible, though the fourth clarifies that there are multiple switches to push, starting with the far right. The fifth letter has the remaining order laid out, with the sixth bringing up the yellow ribbon. 7 and 8 combine to finish the thought, stating that it's necessary to put a hand into the incinerator while holding the ribbon. The final 2 notes seem to allude to an alternate universe event that I'll get into later on. Heading over to the large machine, Yoshiki proceeds to hit each button in the proper sequence. Correctly using the ribbon, a new path opens beyond the mouth of the incinerator. Surrounded by the lingering malice of the evil spirit, Yoshiki and Shinozaki press on. Entering the heart of the unknown area, the last thing the two hear is a confused inquiry from somewhere in the room. Back with Satoshi's group, the spirits have brought the trio to a passageway full of corpses. Heading south, the students end up in the exact same place as their friends. Following the trail, a maze of doors keeps them busy for a while. Emerging from the exit, the teams finally reunite with each other. While the remains haven't been found yet, Satoshi gets the sense that they're right on top of them. Halting progress for the moment, Yuka mentions that she's been in pain since they came to this area. Suddenly, the aching gets worse for seemingly no reason. As a familiar voice rings out, it becomes clear who's responsible for the damage. Refusing to let the teens claim her body, the malevolent being promises that their final moments will be blood-covered.
He said it! He said it!
Met with an unwillingness to turn back, the spirit escalates her attack on Yuka. Jumping in before it's too late, the girl's other half fights against her evil doppelganger. Disappearing in a flash, the students are left alone, allowing Yuka to regain herself. Returning in a weakened state, the young woman is barely holding on after the confrontation. Using the last of her energy, she gives the group the final piece they need to draw things to a close. Moving to the end of the walkway, a hole opens up underneath them, taking the teens even deeper. Falling into a small room, they manage to arrive unscathed. Checking the adjacent area, the students find the girl's remains lying out in the open. Before they can do anything with the body, the powerful being erupts into a fit of rage. Sympathizing with the angry spirit, Shinozaki offers a few words of understanding, hoping they'll be enough to get through to her. At first, this approach seems to be effective, but the overwhelming malice causes the ghost to relapse, reverting to its original demeanor. Retreating to the tiny room, preparations are made for the final showdown. retelling. This is the only part of the game that functions like an actual RPG, requiring the player to engage in a turn-based fight. While the original version has more underwhelming visuals, the newer build took inspiration from Blood Covered, resulting in the enemy looking far more intimidating. Thanks to the friendly spirit, each character has a unique class. Satoshi is the heavy hitter, and while he deals good damage, he can also miss a lot if you're unlucky. Naomi is the mage, having access to one of two magic spells. One of these is essentially useless, as it burns all of her MP for less damage in the long run. Yuka is the medic, able to use both single and team healing to keep characters alive. Add the ability to remove poison, and she's easily one of the better choices, despite having less MP than Naomi. Yoshiki deals slightly less damage than Satoshi, but also has access to a variety of support spells. Shinozaki can do moderate healing, resurrection, and has a single spell to buff defense, making her the next best option if Yuka isn't available. Personally, a team of Satoshi, Yuka, and Yoshiki make for a decent run, but other groups are viable as well. Items are also available during the battle, either acting as restoratives or weapons that guarantee a hit at a fixed rate of damage. Regardless of how you prepare, the battle still operates heavily on RNG, meaning you can get swept in only a few turns if you're unlucky. The boss uses a set of 5 moves, with each one varying in effectiveness. Concentrate Evil is a basic heal, being the easiest ability to deal with. Feint is an instant KO move, but thankfully, it rarely ever works, at least in my experience. Rotten Stench has a decent chance to poison a character, removing 3 HP per turn. This isn't the worst thing to deal with, but other priorities may prevent it from being removed right away. The girl's regular attack is moderately painful, but can potentially miss. With certain buffs, it becomes a non-factor, hitting for 0 each time. Evil Filament is the truly dangerous wildcard, and it gets used a fair amount. Inflicting damage to the entire party, it'll either hit for 9 HP or 15. If Yuka isn't present, this is much harder to deal with. Not only that, but because the spirit always goes first, you can get killed even if you set up a heal prior. After achieving victory, you receive absolutely nothing for your troubles. All things considered, this is a pretty decent fight on the whole. It may not be overly difficult, but there's still a fair amount of challenge, and the battle music isn't too bad either. Finishing the ghost off, the students purge the malicious energy, watching as the girl's spirit is finally put to rest. As the school becomes unstable, the teens aren't sure what their next move is. Suddenly, the school bell rings out in the distance, foreshadowing something sinister. Sure enough, all of their lives are in danger, as the lingering spirit of the girl warns them of a last-ditch effort being made by the remaining ghosts of the Nexus. Told to return to the classroom that links back home, the students only have so long before escape becomes impossible. Learning of a hidden panel somewhere in the room, Satoshi locates the exit leading back to the building. From here, the player has to navigate a maze of sorts while the chimes continue to count down. Clearing the underground, all that's left is a race to beat the clock. Making it to the entry point, the doorway is now acting as a portal. Before entering, the spirit emphasizes the importance of facing forward the whole way through. Walking into the light, various imagery attempts to trick the player, even showing the other characters turning around to go back. Staying on the correct path, the group safely makes it home with everyone intact. Leaving the building, Naomi heads back to grab something, with Yoshiki encouraging Satoshi to follow her. Catching up, the duo thinks more about the awful circumstances the spirit was trapped with. Reminding his friend that the girl is free now, the two can move past the incident with no regrets. Staying in their room, Naomi takes the opportunity to ask Satoshi a personal question. Before he can answer, the young woman gets flustered. Trying again, Naomi invites him to her place for a relaxing date of sorts. Accepting the offer, the future looks bright for the new couple. Elsewhere, Yoshiki wonders about the origin of the story that was told at the start, to which Shinozaki states that the girl may have passed it around a long time ago. Left with this possibility, the game draws to a close, at least for now. As is the case with the other Corpse Party games, there's a correct ending, as well as various wrong ends. The original has 7 different paths that can be explored, with each containing their own unique story elements. Making certain choices will result in these additional routes, leading specific characters to their untimely demise. Aside from the extra developments, players may also be glad to know that this makes the final boss more challenging, as options for party members become more scarce. Before I get into the individual endings, I'll briefly go over all of the incorrect choices that can be made during the general story. The only outlier here happens if you choose to skip the opening cutscene, as this just condenses the intro down to a few sentences. You have the option to refuse Yuka's charm at the beginning, which she silently accepts. After finding the corpse a few rooms over, the player can yell at Yuka rather than comfort her. Doing this naturally makes her upset, and Naomi chastises Satoshi for being an asshole. Making their way to the infirmary, the elder brother can refuse refused the request to take a break, with Yuka not appreciating this. All of this comes to a head just before the bathroom scene. Even if you choose for Satoshi to take Yuka, she'll refuse, wanting to be with Naomi instead. This leads into a different ending, so bookmark that for later. After Yuka gets trapped inside of the stall, the player can climb the door instead of kicking it, but this only serves to make the apparition appear more quickly. When the spirit asks the brother if he's willing to die for his sister, saying no will amuse her, going on to taunt him for a bit. Despite his answer, Satoshi is still determined to save his sibling, shoving the ghost aside. Refusing to die on the second choice, a similar outcome is seen with different dialogue. Finding Naomi on the ground, you can show concern for her instead of Yuka. Checking on the sister afterwards, she ends up pouting, annoyed that she wasn't the priority. This doesn't amount to anything substantial, as she bounces back shortly after. Once the spirit tells her story, Yoshiki has the option to say no to Shinozaki's request to return. Closely matching the development in Blood Covered, the two fight over her feelings towards Satoshi. Here, the romantic confession gets cut off completely, with Shinozaki not having any of his selfishness. Enjoying the memories she made with everyone, the student wants to ensure they won't be the last. Leaving the coward with some parting words, Shinozaki returns to the school alone. Attempting to leave the room prompts the spirit to return, asking the young man if he's ready to go. With no hesitation now, Yoshiki gathers his courage, wanting to make amends with Shinozaki. In this iteration, the teens find each other immediately, and Yoshiki is forgiven for his actions. The game resumes as normal, with no adverse effects resulting from the former choice to stay behind. Confronting the malicious being in the principal's room will give you the option to not be so forceful with your language. This changes the dialogue, but the scene plays out the same. The two sculptures you come across are male and female, matching the earlier description found on the poster by the bathrooms. If you place the marble statue with the female carving, nothing happens at first. However, when you take it back, Satoshi receives damage to his arm, leaving him near death in the menu. Similarly, if you do the same with the embryo statue in the male sculpture, the girls take damage to their stomachs, putting them in the same position health-wise. Deciding against playing the piano, Naomi will force the song regardless, moving the story forward. Avoiding the path laid out by the spirits will cause them to disappear, requiring the player to repeat the previous inputs. After hitting the switches of the incinerator, the game prompts you to use the ribbon. You're then presented with 3 choices on what to do with the important item. If either of the wrong ones is selected, the room bursts into flames. The students attempt to escape, resulting in Shinozaki getting burned to a crisp. Moments later, Yoshiki follows suit, hoping he can at least be with the girl he loves in the afterlife. Keeping this in mind, I'd like to revisit the last 2 messages that were unrelated to the incinerator's operation. The first note mentions Shinozaki reappearing in a different part of the school a year later. The second letter states that her body was charred. It's possible that this version of the girl arrived home after failing to use the ribbon correctly, having her remains ejected by the whims of the Nexus. Threatened by the ghost before the final battle, Satoshi has the option to back down, earning him an incredibly sarcastic remark from Naomi. Failing to run to the portal in time results in the group being overtaken by intense pain, collapsing dead shortly after. The final incorrect choice involves the group turning around while in the white passageway, causing their bodies to be removed from existence. That wraps up everything you can do outside of getting a different story route. From here, I'll be going through the additional endings in order of letter. For context, the regular finale is classified as rank A, keeping everyone alive throughout. Ending B has 3 variations, all involving the death of a single classmate. The requirement for this route is getting caught by the anatomical model in the science lab. The creature specifically targets Shinozaki, leaving Yoshiki free to do as he pleases. Embracing his cowardice, the first choice has the young man run away, dooming the girl to death. Understandably, Yoshiki immediately regrets this decision, cursing himself for abandoning the person he was supposed to protect. Going back inside, the model is gone, but the remains of the young woman have been left behind. Pleading for forgiveness, Yoshiki's guilt is overwhelming, forcing him to leave again. If the player checks the body a second time, the student has nothing left to say, staring in silence. Fast forwarding to the initial meetup, the trio notices the absence of their friend. Confessing his sins, Yoshiki admits to deserting her, bursting into tears. Shocked by the news, the others mourn the loss of Shinozaki. The scene then shifts back to the regular dialogue, dropping the serious topic entirely. This is laughably heartless and happens during every character's death report, but it can't be helped given the limitations of the game. Seeing the bloody message on the chalkboard, Yoshiki gets blocked from entering the important room, asking Shinozaki for guidance. It isn't long before he's taken home, only moderately excited to be safe. Following the girl's backstory, Yoshiki is now the one pleading with the spirit to rescue his friends. Willing to return to the Nexus, the young man is far far more selfless this time around. Reflecting on his cowardly past, Yoshiki is ready to make a change in his life. Still full of regret towards his previous actions, he's determined to never let anything like that happen again. Hell-bent on succeeding, Yoshiki demands to be brought to the other dimension, prepared to take action. During the second team meeting, a strange dialogue loop occurs, with everyone shocked that Shinozaki is dead. It's weird that this wasn't accounted for, as the same thing takes place across the different routes. Skipping to just before the boss fight, Yoshiki sympathizes with the spirit, talking about his own experience with the pain of loss. Jumping to the finale, the group is far more somber upon return, accepting the reality of the situation. Unable to handle this grim state of affairs, Yoshiki ends up taking his own life. After the credits, a single line, presumably uttered by the young man before committing the act, is said to no one in particular. Given what happens in Blood Covered, it's possible that his guilt overtook him in a similar way, losing himself to the darkening. The second offshoot of Route B starts from the same place as the first, but this time, Yoshiki bravely assaults the anatomical model. Continuously being pushed back, Shinozaki pleads with her friend to leave her behind, but he refuses to give up. Effectively using his surroundings, Yoshiki lights the creature on fire, reducing it to ashes. Grateful for the rescue, Shinozaki didn't expect her classmate to jump into danger like that. Laughing to himself, it seems neither did Yoshiki, satisfied to have pushed past his fearful nature. Unfortunately, no good deed goes unpunished, as the model reappears behind the young man, spreading the fire to him. In a matter of moments, Yoshiki burns to death, leaving Shinozaki on her own. Entering the science lab a second time, the girl can't even bear to look at him, quickly returning to the hallway. Reuniting with the others, Shinozaki does her best to report the terrible news. Similar to Yoshiki's scene in front of the portal, the female student is now the one asking him for help. She's also not too thrilled making it home alone, saddened by the loss of Yoshiki. Hearing the spirit's story, Shinozaki is now far more aggressive towards her, blaming the ghost for unwillingly dragging them to the Nexus. Matching her original dialogue, the student remains concerned for the safety of her friends. Assuming the best of Yoshiki, the young woman wants to follow his example, determined to head back to the other dimension. Following the repeat dialogue during the second meeting, Shinozaki gives a speech to the apparition that lines up closely with Yoshiki's. During the finale, all of the girl's emotion spills out at once, but her nightmare is only just beginning. After the credits, the scene moves a day forward, with Shinozaki cleaning herself up. However, as she's doing this, her gaze gradually shifts to a very noticeable bruise. Doing everything she can to get rid of it, the girl's attempts backfire heavily, making the blemish worse the more she messes with it. Seriously panicking, Shinozaki begins injuring herself to remove the mark by any means necessary, but even this doesn't work. Gushing blood from her neck, the young woman passes out, presumably dying from the injury. Mentioning a voice that she heard, it very well could have been Yoshiki's final words from the previous ending. This is an interesting way to conclude things, as the bruise could have acted as later reference for Book of Shadows. While it's slightly different, the violence used here also reminds me a great deal of Higurashi. The combination of these elements this early on paints quite a grim picture, despite text and crude sound effects being the only things present. The final branch of ending B takes place in the bathroom, starting from the point where Yuka's stall fills with blood. Having a severe lapse in judgment, Satoshi leaves his sister in peril after hearing Naomi scream out. Running into the hall, the young man is just in time to see the girl being dragged away by a group of spirits. Moving quickly, Satoshi checks her unconscious body, relieved as she wakes up. Mirroring the exchange from Route A, Naomi explains that the ghosts were essentially harmless. Moving on from this, the brother reports that Yuka is still in danger, dumbfounding Naomi. Claiming that he panicked after she yelled, this gets the teen another earful from the irritated girl. Returning to the stall, Satoshi learns that he's far too late to save his sister. Not having the endurance to hold on, Yuka breathed her last well before the sibling came back. Crushed by a mountain of guilt, the brother considers himself to be a murderer, unable to see anything else as the truth. Out in the hall, Naomi does her best to console the friend, but can't find the words to say. Watching him leave on his own, she tries again, saying that he shouldn't blame himself for what happened. Immediately after, two very different emotional responses become available for selection. The nicer option has Satoshi appreciate the sentiment, but remains weighed down by his choice. Emphasizing the importance of living on for Yuka's sake, Naomi at least convinces the brother on this point. Going with the more fierce option, the sibling lays into Naomi, blaming her for the death of his sister. Now feeling her own sense of guilt, the young woman apologizes, but Satoshi backtracks, knowing it isn't fair of him to shift accountability. Not allowing him to take sole responsibility for the mistake, Naomi makes it clear that she feels just as terrible. Putting an end to this back and forth, Satoshi claims ownership of the the poor decision, going on to echo what Naomi proposed initially. Interrupting this moment, the malicious being appears to rub salt in the wound. Describing the damage she inflicted, the spirit gets a rise out of Satoshi. Wanting to vent his frustration, the teen has two choices to work with. Going for a punch makes the ghost slightly more aggressive, while glaring results in the girl taunting the young man, instantly shifting to sinister intentions. Regardless of which decision is made, the apparition moves behind Satoshi, ready to have some fun with him. Unexpectedly, the charm that he received from Yuka at the start manages to keep the spirit at bay, forcing the girl to move on for the time being. Even from beyond the grave, the sister looked out for her sibling. There's actually some additional dialogue you can get if you follow the same route, but don't take the charm. A red flash gives the impression that Satoshi is attacked, but his reaction confirms that this isn't the case. After some additional teasing, the spirit becomes far more serious, promising death only after experiencing an immense amount of torture. Leaving him with that, the girl disappears, though the brother now knows who Yuka's murderer is. When asked about the sister's whereabouts during the meeting, Naomi doesn't give a straight answer, most likely doing her best to navigate the tough situation for Satoshi's sake. Grabbing the piano key from the sculpture room, there's now far less dialogue, with the current situation not exactly being ideal for making jokes. Instead of the more lively reaction at the piano, Naomi simply plays the instrument without further comment. As Yuka isn't present for the scene before the boss, the other teammate becomes the new target for the intense pain. Unlike the former victim, Naomi talks to the spirit as she's being attacked. Showing pity to the apparition, these actions only serve to infuriate the aggressor. Receiving what seems to be a finishing blow, Naomi attempts to confess her feelings, ultimately failing as she passes out from the damage. After the spirits clash, she wakes up again without injury. Giving a speech to the remains, Shinozaki slightly changes the wording to reflect the loss of Yuka. The events that follow remain the same, but just before jumping into the portal, the missing person appears in front of the group. Shocked by her appearance, Naomi runs towards her, but Satoshi cuts this short, wanting to make sure it isn't dangerous. Safely approaching, he assumes the sibling is here to see them off, but can't receive an answer as Yuka isn't able to speak. Apologizing to his sister one last time, Satoshi tears up, with his sister doing the same. Watching the spirit vanish, the brother is told that it's time to leave. Offering a nice interpretation of Yuka's feelings, Naomi provides Satoshi with some closure, if only a little. Returning to the correct school, the young man is distraught, not wanting to accept the fact that his sister is no more. Making his way back home by the post-credit sequence, Satoshi now faces the challenge of covering up the disappearance. With his parents blissfully unaware of the real reason Yuka is gone, there's no way in hell the sibling can reveal the truth. While trying to come up with some kind of plan in his room, Satoshi's gaze lands on what seems to be a present. Reading the message that came with it, the brother is shocked to learn who the sender is. Immediately after, a familiar noise comes from the adjacent room, formerly belonging to the one who's no longer here. Not daring to open the door, Satoshi instead peers through the lock, seeing someone he knows all too well. While part of it is missing, this particular ending is very close to Blood Cupboard's extra ending from the final chapter. In fact, Route C makes it a point to fill in the remaining gaps. This course becomes available after fulfilling one of two conditions. The first is playing normally until Yuka needs to use the bathroom, then allowing Naomi to take her instead of Satoshi. Conversely, as mentioned before, you can be mean to Yuka to automatically have the route chosen by default. Regardless of the method used, Satoshi will be left to wander around while the girls do their business. Examining the poster on the right, the teen wonders what the elaborate description is referring to. Suddenly, the room goes dark, and the same spirits that came after Naomi are now after Satoshi. The student gets two choices, but both result in the same outcome. If Satoshi yells, nobody answers, and if he tries to run, he gets cut off. The middle ghost approaches, wondering if the new visitor is just like them. Wanting to provide some information, another decision needs to be made. Saying yes will give you the same rundown that Naomi got, while the evil apparition hides nearby. Interrupting the conversation, the girl states her motivation for bringing people to the Nexus. The teen is then knocked unconscious and left in the far right section of the hall. Going back, if you select no, then confirm the choice to ignore them, the spirit will only have a single line of dialogue, followed by the ghost girl taking you out right away. While Satoshi is out cold, a view from inside of the girl's bathroom becomes visible, showing Naomi dashing into the stall and pushing Yuka to safety. Waking up a bit later, the young man jumps to his feet, hoping nothing bad happened while he was out of commission. Running to the bathrooms, Satoshi is just in time to meet his sister as she rushes through the door. Yuka tries to explain something important, but stumbles over her words in a panic. Trying again, the girl recalls how she got trapped in the stall, but was set free thanks to Naomi. Naomi, allowing the sibling to escape by taking her place. Oddly, the seemingly confined student casually makes her way back to them. Checking on his friend, Satoshi is met with a satisfactory, yet somewhat indifferent response. Yuka is noticeably confused by this development, but decides to drop it, grateful that the other girl is alright. Moving to the second team meeting, the dialogue is mostly the same, but Naomi's lines are a little more stiff. Following the first interaction with the sculptures, Satoshi's group heads to the principal's office, but before they reach it, Naomi leaves the other two behind. The player can head back down, where they'll quickly see a flame disappear. Moving north again, the girl will be waiting for Satoshi, asking him if he's alright. Brushing this strange occurrence aside, the trio makes their way to the tiny room. You can also simply go straight to your destination after she leaves, progressing things without the extra cutscene. Upon entering, Naomi leaves again, claiming she has other matters to attend to. The siblings aren't sure what's going on with her, but decide to let her go about her business for the time being. Strangely, the room has already been destroyed, with no additional encounter taking place. Without warning, the tiny space gets even smaller as the walls close in. Finding the door blocked, Satoshi calls out to the other friend, hopeful that she's still around. Not having any luck with this, two choices become available. Kicking the door proves to be effective, as the teen is barely met with any resistance. Going with the more defeatist option, the two hold each other close, waiting for their inevitable demise. Luckily, the door opens on its own, allowing the duo to escape in the nick of time. In both scenarios, the siblings assume that Naomi was responsible for helping them, but the hallway is totally empty. Returning to the deadly area, the two make the obvious discovery that their missing friend isn't there. Grabbing the item from the sculpture room, Yuka is now the one to explain what it is. Stopping just before the door, the sister has a few more thoughts in regards to their near-death experience. Coming to the conclusion that someone was holding the door in place, she wonders who is behind the malicious act. Briefly considering Naomi as a suspect, the two quickly reject this idea, knowing their friend is a better person than that. Changing the subject, Satoshi is curious if his sibling is interested in anyone. Mentioning someone from her class, Yuka states that confessing is impossible right now. Encouraging his sister, Satoshi's mood drops, knowing he hasn't been able to do the same. Worried about the girl who's currently missing, the young man is honest with his feelings. Caring deeply for Naomi, Satoshi is determined to find her again no matter what. After following the path laid out by the spirits, the siblings run into Naomi on the way down. Not getting a response from her, the two watch in horror as the girl's body breaks into pieces. Completely blindsided by the display, the pair breaks into tears, unsure of what caused this development. Suddenly, the evil ghost dashes away, taking the remains of Naomi with her. Thanks to this, Satoshi now understands why the friend had been acting so weird. Becoming furious, the brother is ready to take revenge against the murdering spirit. Running ahead of Yuka, Satoshi comes across the other students, who for some reason are defending the apparition. Making an outrageous confession, Yoshiki claims that they're the ones responsible for Naomi's death. As Shinozaki erupts into a fit of madness, the brother knows that something is very wrong. Being met with a barrage of jealous comments, Satoshi has no idea how to respond to this crazy dialogue. Going on to disrespect the girl's remains, Shinozaki kicks the body across the floor, throwing it into the dark abyss below them. Finally revealing the reason for this insane behavior, Yoshiki states that getting rid of the others will allow them to go free. In a surprising twist, Shinozaki betrays her accomplice, shoving him to his death. Positively ecstatic, the girl is ready to have her beloved Satoshi all to herself. Two options can be selected after this, but the only difference comes from the second choice, resulting in some additional opening dialogue. Taunting the young man, Shinozaki continues to apply overwhelming pressure. Aiming for a sore spot, the girl pulls Satoshi's hidden feelings to the surface. Displaying an enormous amount of selfishness, Shinozaki is completely open about her love for Satoshi, irritated that she was overlooked in favor of someone else. Appalled by this self-serving attitude, the brother pushes the killer back, getting dangerously close to doing something irreversible. Before he can, Yuka finally catches up, calling out to the aggravated sibling. Doing her best to dispel Satoshi's rage, she hopes the words will be enough to snap him out of it. Barely managing to hold on, the brother walks away, punching the ground out of anger multiple times. Having her plan foiled, the evil spirit comes out of hiding, disappointed that it wasn't more successful. Breaking free of the possession, Shinozaki finally regains herself. With no recollection of the previous events, this marks the first instance of the apparition taking a more direct approach against the invading party. Being asked where Yoshiki went, Satoshi has two ways of addressing this question. Being direct with her, the brother reveals the truth to Shinozaki, placing the burden straight in her lap. Yuka chastises him for this, but the sibling would rather be honest about the situation, understanding Understandably, this comes as a big shock to the girl, immediately becoming upset. Despite her feeling personally responsible, Satoshi tries to convince Shinozaki that it was out of her control. Going with the nicer option, the brother makes up a lie to absolve the girl of any guilt. Unfortunately, Shinozaki continues to blame herself, resulting in similar dialogue. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls up to the group, followed by Yoshiki re-emerging from the deep hole. Amazingly, the student managed to recover from the fall, feeling decent enough to even joke about the damage. Wondering what's been going on, Yoshiki is told not to worry about it, as the danger is finally past. Shedding a few tears of relief, Shinozaki shows that she does in fact care for the formerly deceased classmate. With this being the conclusion of the scene, I'd like to pause here for just a moment. As much as I enjoy the rest of the game, this section in particular might be my favorite. This isn't just because of the execution, but also because of the foreshadowing. Right from the beginning, a lot of care is taken in regards to leaving breadcrumbs that eventually lead to Shinozaki's emotional outburst, though some of these are more obvious than others. Hesitating on who she wants as a teammate, the girl gets paired with Yoshiki, visibly regretting this decision afterwards. Trapped in the small room, the most direct clue is shown after Satoshi is mentioned by Yoshiki. Meeting up, Shinozaki addresses Satoshi first, going out to be slightly aggressive towards Naomi. During the incorrect decision following the flashback, Shinozaki insists that she wants to save everyone, but when they were advised not to go back to the Nexus, Satoshi is the only one she's concerned about. This eventually culminates in her jealousy being voiced, going on to declare just how important the teen is to her. The facial expressions are also a nice touch here, showcasing the extreme feelings being pulled out of her. Bloodcover definitely matches this infatuation to some degree, though Shinozaki keeps this crush more to herself, instead being far more cruel to Naomi. Either way, it's really cool seeing the differences between the two iterations. Moving on from this, there's no confrontation with the evil ghost, instead jumping to the friendly spirit passing on her power. Talking to the remains, Shinozaki presents the same words from the previous ending, though given what just happened, it's questionable how sincere they are. As the group reaches the portal, Naomi makes another appearance behind them. Just like last time, a character excitedly runs towards their deceased friend, and Satoshi prevents them from getting too close. Unlike before, this ghost is talking, and it's actively guilt-tripping the others into a trap. Held captive by his feelings, Satoshi continues advancing, only for the spirit to reveal its deadly hand at the last moment. Rushing in to save him, Yuka doesn't notice an attack coming from behind. Struck by one of the flames, it doesn't take long for her body to ignite, snapping the brother out of his trance. Doing its job, the apparition disappears, leaving Yuka at death's door. Despite her heavy injuries, the sister still finds the strength to tease her brother a bit. Bringing up their former conversation about love interests, Satoshi is told that he's the one she actually cares about. Much like Shinozaki, Yuka complains that she was never seen because of someone else. Wanting more than sibling love, the player gets to choose whether or not to reciprocate these feelings. With the exception of extremely minor dialogue differences, the decision doesn't matter, as Satoshi can't go along with the idea. Mentioning the power of their blood bond, the brother gives a half answer, satisfying his sister. Saying their final goodbyes, the girl passes on, becoming another victim of the Nexus. Losing both of the important girls in his life, Satoshi starts to question his purpose. Interestingly, the credits roll after Yuka's death, cutting out both the portal and the classroom scenes. Afterwards, the exact same scenario plays out at home, with the parents concerned about Yuka. Finding the same present, Satoshi is compelled to check the door, seeing his sister through the lock. Continuing from here, the brother attempts to leave, but he's now trapped in the small room. Not wanting to open the sibling's door, his mind starts to think about Naomi and what she went through during her last moments. Apologizing for not being able to help them, it seems that someone was listening, as the previously stuck door comes loose. Appearing in a flash of light, Yuka comes back to greet her brother, followed by Naomi, delivering her signature catchphrase. Aside from a few location changes, all of the scenes from Bloodcover's identical extra end are fleshed out here. This includes the sibling confession segment, because naturally, Japan will be Japan. That said, the newer version stops where Route B3 did, right as the eye is seen on the other side. While it's not clear what happened during the C ending, you could make the assumption that Satoshi was brought to where the girls were, or he took his life and found them that way. Naomi's death also made for some interesting twists, being an exclusive addition to this game. The final endings are the D ranks, both requiring 2 dead party members. There aren't too many more unique scenes here, though the meetups do go a bit differently. In Route D1, Yoshiki is visibly upset by the death of Yuka, and instead of his normal speech, the teen can only shed tears at the mention of Shinozaki. In Route D2, Shinozaki can't bring herself to say anything about Yuka's death, though her dialogue dialogue about Yoshiki's death remains the same. D1 has the same portal scene as B3, with Yuka's spirit visiting them before leaving. The ending also shows Satoshi's parents worried about the younger sibling. However, before the teen notices the present sitting on his desk, he hears the voice of Yoshiki yelling for him. Staying alive this time around, the survivor is anything but happy, contradicting his wild facial expression. Calling Satoshi outside, the friend is furious that he's still alive instead of the former love interest. As Yoshiki charges with a knife, the brother has little time to act, prompting a choice to be made. Stopping himself partway, the distraught teen confesses that he wants to be the lone recipient of the blade. Chastised for this line of thinking, Yoshiki doesn't care, still full of despair after leaving Shinozaki to die. Managing to talk him out of his self-sabotage, Satoshi is left staring at the broken remains of his friend. Once again, D2 ends with the appearance of Yuka, as well as the parent scene. Cutting off before the gift is found, this time, Shinozaki comes to the brother's house. Being asked if he's upset, Satoshi can't help but notice how strange the girl is acting, with his gaze eventually resting on a large tome that she brought with her. Asking her friend a moral question about murder, the girl patiently waits for an answer. Interested by the response, she then goes on to inquire about another taboo. Shinozaki excitedly mentions the research she's been doing, only to be met with skepticism towards the whole concept of resurrection. The girl is adamant that it's possible, claiming it's already been done by others before. Getting more personal, Shinozaki attacks the complacent teen, stating he doesn't care enough about the loved ones they lost. Being swayed by her passion, the young man starts considering the unorthodox solution, ready to tread in unfamiliar territory. This is another interesting scenario that would later find its way to the finale of Book of Shadows. The main difference here is that instead of Naomi tagging along, Satoshi is now faced with the weight of resurrection himself. It's also worth mentioning that Shinozaki was using that very same magic during the last fight, so it shouldn't be that much of a shock. Aside from these endings, the last thing in the game to point out is the sound test. At the end screen, you can choose not to quit to the main menu, looping you back to the same window. If you do this 5 times, you'll be met with a different prompt, taking you to the hidden area. Here, Yuka will congratulate you, mention how the game has other special things to find, and give instructions on how to listen to music. Satoshi will allow you to see what endings you've discovered, as well as save data towards that total. That said, regardless of whether or not you do every route, the clear data has to be saved through Satoshi. The reason this matters is because of a secret that can be obtained through completion. What is this secret? Well, after the original Corpse Party was released, it gained a sizable online following, resulting in fan games being made. One of these is a direct sequel to Ending C, another is a prequel to the main game, while a third entry is a sequel to the prequel, taking place years after Ending A of the original release. If I understand correctly, the prequel, known as Corpse Party 0, had a demo placed within Corpse Party Rebuilt. By doing a completion run, you can play this trial version of 0, with the full version also being available to download. I'm somewhat curious about these side entries, so I may end up talking about them at a later date. While the core of Corpse Party's initial build is still intact, the additional updates found in the newer version really come together to elevate the experience. Jumping into this game with no prior knowledge, I came out of it feeling way more satisfied than I would have expected. Despite the limitations, there's a lot to love here, and I would now consider it to be one of my favorite entries in the series. If you'd like to try the game for yourself, you can find it on the Memories of Fear forum page. Following the 1996 release of Corpse Party, it would be roughly a decade before fans would see any new official content. Starting in October of 2006, Team GrisGris revealed a completely remade version of the game for the NTT Docomo brand of Japanese phones. Going by Corpse Party New Chapter, contents were put out episodically, showcasing a brand new art style and expanding on the original story. That said, only 4 chapters ever came out, with the project coming to a close in December of 2007. Luckily, in March of the next year, a PC version would become available, reusing and enhancing old assets. Thanks to the increased processing power, environments were much bigger, and a cast of amateur voice actors allowed for deeper immersion. This version would also be episodic, spanning 3 years from 2008 to 2011. The 5th and final chapter would be added as well, bringing a much-needed conclusion to the remake. During the game's release, the first of 6 Corpse Party manga adaptations would start production, arguably being one of the best entries to come out of the series in general. Before the end of Blood Covered was finished, developer and publisher 5PB joined forces with Team GrisGris for another project. In August of 2010, Blood Covered Repeated Fear came out for PSP, acting as the definitive edition. However, that very same month, the second manga adaptation would see the light of day, for better or for worse. Corpse Party Musume, or Corpse Party the Girl if you prefer, is an entry of the overall universe that certain fans prefer to completely ignore. With the games taken care of for the time being, Makoto Kedouin received a different kind of opportunity. Given free reign over the presentation, he completely reimagined his original work in manga form. Not only would it repurpose the main story, but it also included elements from most of the different endings. The artist that adapted Book of Shadows would get their start here, applying the cute style to this iteration of the series. Together, the two colleagues brought new life to the PC-98 game. That said, certain other preferences were included as well, resulting in a major change taking place. In short, the manga is absolutely riddled with fan service, particularly of the lolly variety. Having full control, Kedouin and the artist took every opportunity to inject a number of sexual aspects into just about every page. Panty shots are rampant, chapter openings have their share of lewd artwork, nudity is relatively common, and various other things are present throughout. There's even a panty guide, a throat guide, and a bust guide that show up at the end of each chapter. The series gets pretty close to doujin territory on multiple occasions, but knows how to restrain itself to avoid that. For a lot of Western fans, this equates to a very cursed experience. Personally, I've never really had a problem with fan service, and after consuming hundreds of different anime, it doesn't really register anymore. My brain will switch off, ignoring it completely in favor of the story elements. The thing is, if the author of a work is adamant on including it, certain issues become a factor. A minor consideration is that your audience may not be into what you are. This leads to a larger problem. If you're not careful, the fan service may actively sabotage your story. This is especially true if your series isn't known for having sexual elements. In this case, if you happen to be a more casual Corpse Party fan that likes horror but doesn't care much for anime, it could result in a major shock to the system. Degenerates like me won't even flinch, but the average consumer will not have a good time. On that note, there's actually a very relevant example I can provide in regards to this point. You may recall that in my last video, I mentioned a certain fetish returning that involved weak bladders. This is referring specifically to Yuka, with Satoshi doing his best in blood cover to find a working bathroom. Whether or not this aspect was intentional has always been up for debate. However, the very first page of the Musume manga paints a clear picture that answers the question. Reusing some drawings for a joke panel, Yuka and the spirit are seen engaging in a certain unique contest. As far as this series is concerned, this is about as definitive as it gets. The original game could only fit so many assets, resulting in the bathroom visit being immediate. Blood Cover had a lot more to work with, meaning this particular idea could be expanded on. Various parts are dedicated to searching for a bathroom, leading to the discovery that they're not working. Yuka is also put in dangerous situations to prolong the process, with the outcome changing depending on the route. Book of Shadows also had this scenario written into a few specific places. Between that and the incestuous subplot, I completely understand why a lot of fans don't like Yuka. This knowledge may not ruin the games, but for some, it may serve to cheapen the experience. Outside of that example, Musume provides plenty of others to work with, which you'll see as we continue. Character designs are pretty good on the whole, using the blood-covered models as a baseline. Satoshi is roughly the same, though his hair is a bit shaggier this time around. Naomi is almost one-to-one, with the same going for Shinozaki and Yuka. Yoshiki receives the biggest visual change by far, looking like a combination of his newer model mixed with more Ashige. Being a new addition to the cast, Miyu Shinohara is a manga-exclusive trans character. While her original gender is male, she's far more comfortable engaging in a feminine lifestyle. Even Naho makes an appearance, present for a few select scenes. With all of that out of the way, this is your final warning before we begin. While the previous discussion on the game was closer to the average side of horror, Musume sits near the abyss, but for a completely different reason. Despite the nature of the material, I honestly feel that this adaptation is fairly well done, provided you can stomach the high amounts of fan service. With this in mind, I'll be breaking down the story while also highlighting some of the manga's absurdities. That said, let's begin. Kicking things off with the color page, Naho is seen preparing to do research on the hidden nexus. Shifting to the school in question, Shinozaki is in the middle of telling the ghost story from the game's intro. Going past the initial disappearance of the body, a new detail is added, mentioning the slow decline of students due to paranormal activity. Much like the original, the tale gets cut short by an unexpected outburst. All of the main characters are properly introduced, including the newcomer Miyu. As the group prepares for the festival, the power goes out, resulting in Satoshi grabbing Naomi's chest out of fear. Hearing a noise, the brother checks the door, discovering his sister as the power returns. Thanks to another outage, the room is again bathed in darkness. Music can be heard coming from a different area, prompting Naomi and Satoshi to take a look. However, before they can, an earthquake shakes the building, causing a portal to open in the floor. Falling into the strange rift, a series of deadly premonitions skeletons become visible, showcasing the group as a pile of dead corpses. Waking up a little later, Satoshi and Naomi take notice of their new surroundings. After a centipede becomes the source of some fan service, Yoshiki and Shinozaki arrive on the scene. Learning more about their state of affairs, the teens aren't sure what to make of their situation. Unable to handle the pressure, Shinozaki quickly breaks down into tears, desperate to leave. Unfortunately, the teens currently have no way of doing that, and to make things worse, two of their companions are missing. With the group deciding to search the area, Yoshiki divides the teams himself, cutting Shinozaki off before she can say anything. As the first duo heads out, the teen who orchestrated everything is now alone with the girl he cares about. Displaying a sinister expression, Yoshiki unnecessarily makes his partner more uneasy. Suggesting they check whatever entry points they can find, the young man impatiently moves into the hall. Annoyed with the person she's stuck with, Shinozaki is anything but satisfied. Back with the others, Naomi is being proactive and getting closer to Satoshi. Not looking where she's going, the girl trips and gets stuck in the floor. More centipedes crawl towards her, with one of them climbing onto a specific body part. Working past this, the two make their way to an adjacent classroom, discovering the remains of a former victim. Receiving the same exposition on their surroundings, it's now delivered by a physical manifestation of the deceased. As far as I can tell, this is one of the characters from the prequel fan game that was released 3 years earlier. While I'm not familiar with it, the inclusion is a decent nod to the Japanese corpse party community. Scared by the prospect of never getting home, Naomi is now the one to plead with Satoshi for support. Obliging her with a resolute answer, the teen calms her down, keeping things together for the time being. Shifting locations, Yoshiki discovers what appears to be an exit. Unamused with a sense of unease his partner is showing, the leader calls her over in hopes of the girl getting more involved. Reluctantly standing by, Shinozaki watches her companion fruitlessly abuse the sturdy door. Continuing to try his luck, Yoshiki eventually gets launched away by an unknown force. At this point, Shinozaki has had enough, deciding to join back up with the rest of her classmates. Moving over to the infirmary, it's here that the missing teens are located. Helping Yuka with a minor injury, Miyu wants the two to stay where they are, knowing that getting lost could result in bigger problems. Changing the subject to distract the little sister, the topic of love interests is brought up, with both individuals having someone they care about. Revealing her plans to confess in the near future, Miyu receives encouragement from her companion, renewing her sense of hope. Finding themselves back to their current situation, the student does her best to think up a new topic. Talking about her past, Miyu recalls a day when she experienced a lot of bullying from the people around her. Hearing about this, Satoshi rushed to where she was, worried about her well-being. Touched by this gesture, the classmate knew that she could always count on her friend from that point on. Using this trust as the reasoning behind them waiting here, Miyu knows that Satoshi will do everything he can to locate the duo. Hearing a condescending remark from behind her, the student turns around, not seeing anything noteworthy. Quickly having her Achilles tendon sliced, Miyu presumably doesn't feel the pain, instead noticing the nearby voice and the blood pooling by her feet. Worried about the dangerous new presence, she attempts to run away with Yuka, only to collapse shortly after. Warning her companion of the threat, Miyu tells the sister to get away while she can. Not having the strength to drag her out of the room, Yuka makes a break for it, claiming she'll return with help. Hearing more sinister words from behind her, Miyu finally sees the creature she's dealing with. Emerging from the corner of the bed, a collection of spirits launches an attack, capturing the helpless student with a mess of tentacles. Unable to get away from the monster, Miyu isn't confident that she'll be able to survive. Lifting the victim into the air, the creature uses its tendrils to violently dig into a certain part of her body. In the midst of this, Miyu notices that Yuka never left, too scared to move after witnessing the strange being. Before it can go after the sister, the captive uses her teeth to fight back, doing everything she can to keep the attention on herself. Regrettably, this proves to be too effective, as the creature violates her to death. Just before passing on, Miyu's inner thoughts are shown in regards to her feelings towards Satoshi. Regretting her inaction, the classmate wishes she had been brave enough to confess earlier. Hearing Yuka scream from inside the infirmary, Satoshi and Naomi head to the scene. Managing to locate his sibling, the brother wonders if Miyu is also nearby. Following in the footsteps of school days, Yuka holds tightly to the severed head of her former friend. Understandably, the duo is shocked by this development, horrified to learn of Miyu's death. Asking about the rest of her body, the students become aware of the dangerous creature, as well as the corpse it's keeping as a plaything. Furious they didn't get there sooner, Satoshi shoulders the blame, with Naomi consoling him as best she can. Suddenly, the spirit of Miyu appears before the group. Distraught that she couldn't do anything to save her, Yuka bursts into tears, validating the belief her friend held onto. Much like the game ending where the sister can't speak, Miyu is now the one experiencing this problem. Unable to properly convey herself, the former student knows that her chance has ultimately immediately vanished. Looking at the closeness of the two in front of her, this hard truth is further solidified. Losing herself in despair, Miyu vanishes, becoming one with the school. Enjoying the show from afar, a certain girl decides that now would be a good time to introduce herself. Entering the room, Naho cuts to the chase, presenting the group with information she's gathered. Reiterating a few earlier points about the source of the Nexus, the girl goes on to confess that she's still looking for a way out. Refusing an invitation to join the students, Naho goes back to investigating alone. Enjoying herself a little too much, the cruel side of the paranormal expert is looking forward to the near future. Knowing that Miyu would want them to stay safe, the trio decides to regroup with their other classmates, leaving the infirmary before something else happens. Becoming increasingly worried about the well-being of her brother, Yuka offers him her good luck charm. Initially refusing it, the sibling eventually decides it would be better to accept the item. Walking for a bit, the group's progress is halted by a sudden earthquake. Allowing it to pass, the teens discover that they have no choice but to go back the way they came. Watching Satoshi being compassionate towards his sister, Naomi makes a similar comment as her game counterpart. Stopping the other two, Yuka informs them that she needs to relieve herself. Reaching the bathroom becomes a massive undertaking, as the trip gets dragged out for 2 more pages. Getting distracted as her name is called, Yuka accidentally lets the stream loose. Finding their destination, the girls head into the ladies' room while Satoshi waits outside. Hearing the sound of liquid hitting the floor nearby, the teen gets curious and looks around. Running into the evil apparition, he finds her floating in the air, leaking. Well, you know that scene in Book of Shadows when Naomi has that black stuff coming out of her? It's a lot worse here. Laughing maniacally, the spirit then goes on to shoot another stream into the hall. Attempting to leave, Satoshi gets caught by the apparition. Receiving a bloody injury, the young man collapses to the ground. Meanwhile, Naomi is trying to psych herself up, not wanting to be a burden to the person she cares about. However, as the adjacent mirror lacks any feedback, the girl's sense of unease quickly returns. Trying to keep her mind away from bad thoughts, Naomi strikes up a conversation with Yuka, wanting to get to know her a little better. The motivation stems from both friendliness and a bit of jealousy. Learning that Satoshi has talked about her before, Naomi isn't exactly thrilled with the reputation she has. Seeing the girl's behavior for herself, Yuka knows that she's a good person at heart. Cutting things short, a torrent of blood starts filling the stall that Yuka is currently in. Making things worse, the door is refusing to open, trapping the girl inside. Adding another level of danger, Yuka isn't alone, as a number of spirits emerge from the liquid. Crying out for help, her calls go unanswered, leaving the girl at the mercy of the ghosts. Thankfully, Naomi manages to break through the barrier, pulling Yuka to safety. This doesn't last for long, as the other girl becomes the new captive of the spirits. Ripping her shirt open, the hands give Naomi a massage of sorts. Unable to get away, she tells Yuka to leave her behind. Recalling the last time she received these instructions, the sister can see what's about to happen, wanting to stay. Knowing how much the sibling means to Satoshi, Naomi is adamant that this is the best thing to do. Not having many options, Yuka dashes into the hall, hoping that her brother will be able to help. Unfortunately, things are looking hopeless, as there's no sign of him anywhere. Running to the end of the hall, Satoshi is finally located, regaining consciousness after being assaulted by the evil spirit. Slowly adjusting himself, the teen gradually learns why his sister is so frantic. That said, as a shadow approaches from behind, they may need to worry about themselves before anything else. Thankfully, it turns out that Naomi managed to free herself from the trap. Seemingly doing just fine, the girl is more concerned about their friends, wanting to get back to the search. Suggesting they try the area where Satoshi was, the siblings are surprised to see that the hallway has opened up considerably. Checking up on the former victim, Yuka wants to make sure that Naomi isn't just putting on an act for their sake. Reassuring the sister that she's alright, the student is in better condition than expected. Recalling the self-sacrificing request in the bathroom, Yuka is hopeful that Naomi will stay vigilant as they continue their journey. Catching her off guard, the sibling is suddenly accused of being the cause of her near-death experience. Calling out to the ones busy talking, Satoshi cuts the conversation short. Acting like nothing happened, Naomi resumes her friendly demeanor, making the sister question if she actually heard what she did. Elsewhere, the other two are in a bit of trouble, getting trapped in the science lab instead of the tiny side room from the game. Noticing a corpse holding a notebook, Shinozaki reluctantly decides to read the contents. While she's in the middle of this, this, Yoshiki spots an opportunity, reaching for an exposed area of the girl's body. So real quick, you've probably noticed that Yoshiki has been more on the creepy side in this manga. The story tries to justify this by adding its own version of the darkening, but it's only brought up a few select times, and it's only ever relevant to Yoshiki. Rather than him losing his sanity, I think he's just been written as more of an asshole, but I'll let you be the judge of that. Before he can make contact, Shinozaki verbally repeats exactly what he was thinking. Internalizing this strange occurrence, the thoughts are again vocalized verbatim. Not sure how to proceed, his words continue to be immediately stolen. Launching into a fit of insanity, it becomes clear that the girl has been possessed by a lingering spirit. Tackling her to the ground, Yoshiki tries getting through to his classmate, but the concern is thrown back in his face. Grabbing her shoulders, the young man breaks her out of the trance. Waking up in an awkward position, Shinozaki slaps the offender, leaving him confused about the strange behavior. Going back to the notebook, the duo finds a group of pages stapled together, labeled with an ominous message. Ignoring it, Yoshiki digs out a photo of an old class. Oddly, all of the current teens are somehow a part of it, and for some reason, various people's faces have marks over them. Noticing a specific girl, we get a brief glimpse of Sachiko before she died. While the game keeps her nameless, here, her name carries over. Being away from her friends for quite a while now, Shinozaki again starts to lose hope, quickly falling into a negative spiral. Unfortunately, they don't have time to wallow in despair, as a new threat makes itself known. The anatomical model is no longer in the corner of the room, having relocated in the blink of an eye. Sprinting towards them, the creature nearly catches Shinozaki, but Yoshiki delivers a well-placed kick to keep it away. Knowing this won't buy them much time, the teen forcefully pulls the girl elsewhere. Complaining about the treatment, Shinozaki hits a sore spot by mentioning Satoshi. Seemingly annoyed by this remark, Yoshiki lets go of her arm, dashing further ahead. Falling behind, Shinozaki gets grabbed by the model and thrown to the ground. Lashing out at the one who deserted her, the girl tries fighting the mannequin with the loose board, only to get disarmed in a matter of moments. Finding one of her candles, the creature lights it, walking behind Shinozaki at a relaxed pace. Dripping the wax onto her skin, the two engage in a certain activity. Kicking the candle away, Shinozaki desperately holds onto a piece of clothing that the model is trying to remove. Suddenly, a bottle of alcohol smashes into the mannequin. Rushing to the girl's aid, Yoshiki uses a burner to ignite the assailant while educating him on proper consent. Grateful for the rescue, Shinozaki starts to regret the harsh remarks that were made previously. Assuming the worst is over, the duo finally relaxes, proving to be a fatal mistake. Held tightly by the model, Yoshiki is on the verge of death, until a sudden charm incapacitates the mannequin entirely. Looking over to their savior, a certain girl makes another appearance. Sealing up the dangerous room, Naho is met with a wave of enthusiasm from a loyal fan. Mentioning her amazing capabilities, Shinozaki informs her classmate just who they're dealing with. Going on to talk about her rendezvous with the other teens, Naho breaks the news that Miyu met an untimely demise. While Shinozaki immediately believes her, Yoshiki remains skeptical. Passing on another development, Naho reports that a way out still hasn't been secured, with her own efforts falling short. Discouraging the girl further, Yoshiki becomes suspicious of the investigators' intentions. It turns out there may be some truth to this, as Naho takes advantage of the girl's emotional instability. Telling Shinozaki how talented of a medium she is, the paranormal expert gets extremely hands-on to lower the young woman's tension. Seeing enough of this, Yoshiki forcefully breaks them up. Before parting ways, Naho gives them a vial of holy water, certain to be useful while exploring. Moving through another hallway, it doesn't take long before they hear an unknown person crying for help. Yoshiki is against rushing into the situation, but Shinozaki is determined to help if she can. Reaching the classroom in question, the student watches as another girl is swarmed by a group of strange creatures. Arriving too late, the stomach of the captive explodes, thanks to one of the animals burrowing in previously. Understandably shaken by this, Yoshiki informs her that what she's seeing is just an illusion. Unfortunately, the past comes back to bite them, as one of the critters plans to do the same thing to Shinozaki. Thinking quickly, Yoshiki uses the holy water, ejecting the creature before it's too late. As the girl recovers, she informs the other teen of a presence behind him. It turns out that this is the second character from Corpse Party Zero, with both of the sisters getting an opening page together for this chapter. Despite already being dead, the spirit is grateful that someone cared enough to check on her. Thinking more about the past, a short flashback is shown giving a little more background on the siblings. Wearing some very interesting pajamas, the scene shifts to the girls lying in bed together. Being comforted after waking up from a nightmare, it's clear that the younger sister relies heavily on the other family member. It's hard to say exactly what happened after they arrived at the school, but the deceased girl is seen telling her older sister to run away. Initially, she had a selfless attitude about this, but gradually, the spirit's mind deteriorated, blaming the one who supposedly deserted her. Despite these new feelings, the ghost is tired of being alone, wanting to be with her sister again. Looking at the class photo, both girls are crossed out, confirming their death. This is the last time we see these characters, and while they act as little more than a series reference, the manga at least gives the current spirit a purpose, as she's now the one that throws the blood onto the chalkboard. Not sure if they should trust this new information, the students are eventually convinced that it would be a good idea to leave. Over with Satoshi's group, Naomi has taken the opportunity to get closer to her crush. Reaching the end of the hallway, the trio finds a new room they haven't explored yet. Claiming that she's too nervous to go inside, Naomi tries to prove this by placing Satoshi's hand on her chest. Not convinced that he understands her fear, the girl removes just about all of her clothing so the young man can feel her heartbeat directly. Insisting that her feelings are clear, Satoshi pleads with the girl to get dressed. Leaving the bold classmate behind, the other two head into the principal's office, just in time to witness Sachiko getting revenge on the older man. Watching him beg for his life, the spirit gets more enthusiastic with the torture, shouting for her to stop. Satoshi has this action thrown in his face, being told he doesn't have a clue what he's getting involved in. With the apparition's attention now focused on them, the teens realize they've overstayed their welcome. Finding the door locked, the siblings are desperate to escape before it's too late. Enjoying their sense of panic, Sachiko teases them, claiming she can send one of them back home. Expecting the two to fight, the spirit is instead met with a selfless request. Used to her victims being far more selfish, Sachiko has a hard time hiding her disgust. Unamused by this display of kindness, the ghost disappears, letting the two go free. Exiting the room, the teens notice that Naomi has gone missing, searching the area. Being called to by Yuka, the brother assumes that she located their friend. Instead, the girl has gotten herself stuck in the wall, fully exposed from behind. Thanks to her previous accident, Yuka has been without underwear for quite some time. Giving some reasoning for her situation, Satoshi doesn't feel like asking questions, pulling her out of the wall. Going on to wonder about someone keeping the door closed on them, Yuka refuses to think that Naomi could be responsible. Agreeing with her, Satoshi knows that she wouldn't do that. Bringing up an earlier topic, the brother wonders if Yuka has anyone she's interested in. Mentioning someone from her class, the girl refuses to elaborate further. Having his own person in mind, the two siblings are alike in that they're too reserved in their approach. Confessing his feelings for Naomi, Satoshi continues the search, hoping for the best. Making their way into another secluded room, the teens find a lone piano sitting in the back. Testing it out, Yuka shows her musical skill by playing a song. Unexpectedly, this ends up summoning the collective group of victims in the school. Joining the assembly, Miyu returns in a much better mood. Guiding her friends down a secret path, the spirit is still determined to help her friends in any way she can. Shifting to the 2-9 classroom, Shinozaki and Yoshiki are having a hard time getting inside. However, as the room shines brightly, the students become completely engulfed in light. Watching their new surroundings come into focus, a sense of familiarity sets in. Against all odds, the duo manage to find a way back home. Wanting to leave, Yoshiki tries to convince his companion not to worry about the others. Assuming they're still trapped in the Nexus, Shinozaki wants to stay put, annoying the one with the hidden agenda. Putting a damper on things, black mist fills the room, revealing Sachiko's other half. Being the one that dragged them to the alternate dimension, the girl tells a story to shed some light on the reasoning. On a rainy day at school, Sachiko was enjoying the solitude that came with the weather. Approaching the loner on the walkway, the girl's teacher wanted to make sure she was alright. Not expecting a kiss from the man, Sachiko wasn't opposed to it at first. However, as the educator's hand traveled elsewhere, she knew this wasn't a good situation to be in. Confirming this, the teacher wasn't taking no for an answer, determined to make something happen. Stripping her down, the man was looking forward to indulging himself. Threatening to tell everyone about this assault, Sachiko was met with an uncaring tone, mocked for thinking anyone would take her word over his. Having a breakdown, the student couldn't understand why she was being subjected to such horrible treatment. Jumping onto the edge of the walkway, Sachiko furiously told the assailant to leave her alone. Regrettably, the girl accidentally slipped, reacting as the man reached for her. Falling to the ground below, Sachiko died on impact, leaving the teacher in quite the situation. Caught by the head of the school as he tried to hide the evidence, the educator was surprised to find an ally in the principal. With no evidence being left, the girl is eventually forgotten. Remaining in the school as a spirit, Sachiko's hatred grew over time, gradually giving her the power to strike back. One day, the principal mentioned plans he had with a certain someone, revealing his suggestive taste. Returning to his dark office, the man heard the voice of his granddaughter asking him to play hide and seek, obliging the request without a second thought. Being found, Sachiko came out in the open, shocking the accomplice that helped to get rid of the girl. Wanting to know the location of the real granddaughter, the principal was brought to see her. Unfortunately, she was no longer responsive, as the spirit had shoved a giant stick into her eye socket. Stating that she wouldn't stop until the entire family was dead, Sachiko's vengeance had quite the violent start. The intense malice resulted in the formation of a proxy school, acting as the perfect place to take out aggression on unsuspecting victims. The girl's resentment towards the world also caused her to split in two, with the new being taking revenge on anything that moved. Growing weaker over time, this allowed Sachiko to at least save the two students who were nearby. Unable to bring the others, the spirit informs them of a solution that could free them from the Nexus. Cleansing the remains of her body should work in theory, but even the apparition isn't completely sure it'll be successful. Wanting to go back regardless, Shinozaki is met with some extreme resistance. Tired of her infatuation with Satoshi, Yoshiki is honest with her, putting his feelings out in the open. Cutting him off, Shinozaki is aggravated by the sudden confession, knowing it's not the time for this. Wanting to ensure the safety of her friends, the girl heads back alone, determined not to lose them. Returning to the Nexus, Shinozaki is understandably nervous, wondering how effective she'll be by herself. Hearing a voice from behind, the girl is surprised to see Yoshiki again. There's no explanation on how he came back, but given the context of the game, he would have had to ask Sachiko for assistance. Unlike the friendlier interaction from back then, this reunion feels a lot more cynical, with neither person all that enthusiastic after meeting up. Still being led by Miyu, the siblings have made their way into a gruesome area littered with corpses. Following the path, the duo eventually finds a familiar person waiting for them along the way. Glad the friends were able to locate each other, Miyu takes her leave, letting them handle the rest. Relieved to see that Naomi is just fine, Satoshi is ready for them all to get out of this place. However, for some reason, the girl can't see the other companions in front of her. Watching her break down in tears, Satoshi does everything he can to grab her attention. Desperate to convey her feelings, Naomi starts to lose herself in despair. Cutting this interaction short, the girl's body suddenly falls to the ground in pieces, reducing her to a pile of bloody remains. Latching onto Satoshi from behind, Sachiko appears to taunt the young man. Lifting the body into the air, the spirit teases him further, laughing in his face before leaving with the corpse. Realizing that Naomi had been possessed for a long time, the teen's anger starts to build. Dashing after the ghost in a fit of rage, Satoshi wants revenge for the girl he loved. Running into Yoshiki and Shinozaki, the two are currently standing over Naomi's body. Filling them in on the current situation, Satoshi also gets them up to speed on Miyu's unfortunate death. Oddly, the two classmates insult their former companion, saying some very hurtful things. Going further, the duo claims that they were the ones who killed Naomi. Encountering Sachiko themselves, an enticing deal was struck that guaranteed their safety, provided they got rid of the rest of their friends. As Yoshiki holds Satoshi back, Shinozaki cuts all of Naomi's clothing off in front of him. Going on to drag the limbless body to a nearby wall, the girl begins to smash it repeatedly. Furious that Naomi was the one who got the most attention, Shinozaki finally gets to act on those feelings of aggravation. Losing herself in the carnage, this iteration of the girl is very similar to the wrong end counterpart from Blood Covered. Pushing her away from what's left of Naomi, Satoshi gets grabbed by Yoshiki, having his head bashed multiple times. Kicking the assailant away, Shinozaki watches her partner in crime fall to the bottom of the pit. Turning back to Satoshi, the girl is far more calm now, explaining her motivations behind the violent action. Looking at him expectantly, Shinozaki is hopeful that she'll be chosen now that her rival is out of the picture. Before receiving an answer, the manga cuts back to just after Yoshiki had been returned to the school by Sachiko. Assuming that the others had already met a gruesome end, the young man is straightforward with his reasoning. Regardless, Shinozaki is grateful that he decided to come back, able to continue on with his support. Not sure where to go next, Sachiko appears moments later, bringing the two over to the incinerator. Receiving the yellow ribbon from when the spirit was still alive, the duo makes their way inside. Following a fan service moment, the students hear a voice demanding them to stop. While Yoshiki feels it might be better to turn around for the moment, Shinozaki presses on ahead, knowing it's their only option at this point. Arriving at the end of the tunnel, the students have their first encounter with the evil side of Sachiko. Posing the deal from earlier, the spirit forces them to obey, knocking the two out with tremendous pressure. Back in the present, Shinozaki reiterates the conditions of their freedom, with Satoshi actually considering going along with her. Hearing Yuka call out in the distance, the brother snaps back to reality, knowing he can't just abandon his sibling. Pinning Shinozaki to the ground, Satoshi listens to the violent plans the girl has for his sister. Refusing to let anything happen to Yuka, he decides the only thing he can do is to take Shinozaki out himself. Encouraging him, the girl wants to see if Satoshi will actually go through with the murder. Thinking back to their time at school, the teen can't bring himself to kill a friend, despite the awful behavior he's witnessed. Angry at this lack of conviction, Shinozaki chastises him for backing down, though seems to be regaining herself in the process. Collapsing to the ground, the girl is also reluctant to keep attacking her friend. Still thinking about the festival they were preparing for, Satoshi laments the terrible circumstances they've been forced to deal with. Finally locating the others, Yuka is glad to see that both of the students are doing okay. However, as the nearby wall comes into view, the girl gets a good look at what's left of Naomi. Taking the blame, Shinozaki reverts to her violent self, ready to complete the deal. Slowly approaching, Yuka doesn't understand why the girl is acting like this, receiving more threats as she gets closer. This doesn't stop the sister from trying to break through, pleading with Shinozaki to snap out of it. Being a little too effective, the possessed girl vomits all over Yuka, passing out shortly after. Leaving Shinozaki's body, the apparition is annoyed that she couldn't get them all to kill each other. As the victim slowly wakes back up, it appears that she doesn't remember the cruelty she committed. Recalling her journey through the incinerator, Shinozaki goes on to ask a very difficult question. Lying to her, Satoshi tells the girl that Yoshiki died protecting her, but she still ends up reacting aggressively to the news. Suddenly, an unknown sound is heard, followed by a hand climbing up the side of the walkway. Incredibly, Yoshiki is still alive, being pulled to safety by his friends. Asking Satoshi if anything strange happened, he's met with a satisfactory answer. Confirming themselves as the remaining survivors, the group is ready to put an end to this. Being filled in on their new objective, Satoshi takes point, leading the students further along the path. Handed the ribbon in class photo, the brother notices that Naomi has a different marking compared to the others. Taking this as a hopeful sign, Satoshi stays positive, while the others have no idea what to make of it. Reaching the end of the hall, it seems the walkway led them nowhere, until the floor suddenly opens up underneath them. Falling to the area below, the teens now find themselves at their destination. Walking a short distance, the students finally locate the remains of Sachiko. As they go back and forth on how to handle the situation, the group gets interrupted by the evil apparition, not the least bit happy with their arrival. Being told they want to help her pass on, the spirit isn't the least bit receptive to this, reflecting on other memories from just after she died. It turns out that her body wasn't just hidden by the teacher and principal, but was also violated by them immediately after. Her mother had come to the school looking for some kind of answers, but was turned away by the very same monster that concealed her. With the spirit's voice falling on deaf ears, nothing more could be done, leaving her to rot away in isolation. Claiming it's impossible to move on, Sachiko is surprised to hear that the students are familiar with her story. They're even able to empathize to some degree, experiencing their own pain since being here. Considering how this group is the only one that avoided betraying each other, the spirit's guard starts to drop. It falls even further as Satoshi returns the precious yellow ribbon that was previously lost. Recalling the compassion of the mother that never stopped searching, Sachiko's walls finally crash down, being met by her other half. Apologizing for everything, the spirits are grateful for the chance to finally be laid to rest. Merging together, Sachiko is ready to abandon the nexus she created. Unfortunately, the same can't be said about the rest of the victims, not willing to let the group escape without a fight. With the spirits wanting to steal the teen's life essence for themselves, Sachiko tells them to get out while they still can. Stating that Class 29 can warp them back, they need to hurry, as a select number of clock chimes will signal the end of everything. Opening a path, the girl stays behind to give them a chance to escape. Regrettably, it seems this opportunity may be short-lived, as Sachiko's power can't match the collective strength of the school's captives. Arriving just in time, Miyu contributes her own energy to the protective wall. Making a new friend in the midst of the chaos, Sachiko does her best to hold steady. With 3 chimes to spare, the teens reach the portal safely, being met by a familiar voice. It turns out that Naomi is safe and sound, but her authenticity is called into question. Claiming to have been trapped in the bathroom the entire time, the brother wonders if her death on the walkway was just one big illusion. Being shown concern returned by the girl he cares about, Satoshi couldn't be more grateful to know that she's alive. Interrupting their reunion, Shinozaki reminds them of their objective, still holding on to a bit of jealousy. Giving them some final instructions, Sachiko informs them of the need to face forward while entering the light. Keeping Miyu in their thoughts, the group plans to honor her memory after they return. With a way out secured, the teens are ready to head home. Reaching his hand out, Satoshi waits for Yuka, but someone else takes it instead. Much like Route C of the original game, one of the lingering spirits attacks Yuka from behind. Watching her get brutalized in a number of ways, Satoshi rushes over, getting rid of the assailant. Things only continue to get worse as a large group of the deceased blocks their exit. Thinking quickly, Shinozaki reminds Yoshiki of the holy water they acquired from the other classroom. Managing to rid themselves of the danger, everyone's eyes now fall on Yuka, who's barely cautious after the attack. The girl's final words closely resemble what gets seen in the game, bringing up the lie she told about her love interest. Confessing her true feelings, Yuka wants to hear the same from her brother. Just like before, Satoshi provides a proper response without confirming anything further. Reminiscing on days past, the brother watches his sibling breathe her last. As the building starts to collapse, the group again gets ready to leave, with Satoshi wanting to bring Yuka back with them. Unfortunately, it seems that the school isn't willing to let her go, dropping the body through the floor. Making his intentions clear, Satoshi tells the others to go home without him. Fiercely objecting to this, Naomi emphasizes that sacrificing himself is the worst thing he could do. Openly declaring her love, the girl refuses to let anything happen to the one who's still alive. The other students feel similarly, not allowing their friend to commit any reckless acts. Being more rational now, Satoshi plans to honor his sister's memory after they return. Accepting the reality of the situation, the young man carries on, wanting to keep his new girlfriend safe no matter what. Appearing back in their original dimension, the group has finally made their way home. While they're all glad to be back, a somber mood quickly overtakes them, knowing the horrible events that took place will haunt them forever. Shifting to the events of Route A, Satoshi is encouraged to follow Naomi as she heads back to the classroom. Unlike before, Shinozaki watches him leave, holding on to her jealousy even now. As the two talk about Sachiko's cruel circumstances, Satoshi provides some comfort in the fact that she's been set free. Knowing he's right, Naomi is glad they could bring everything to a close. That said, there's still one issue outstanding, as the girl brings up the confession from earlier. Reiterating his feelings, Satoshi is met with an invitation to spend some quality time with the girl he cares about. Leaving the school, the young man thinks about the future, wondering what to expect. As this entry is the only one to exist outside of the main lore, the group never has the realization that the deceased get forgotten. Hard to say if that's a good thing, but at least they don't have to deal with all the bullshit in the later games, I guess. Elsewhere, the other two discuss the origin of the story from the beginning, rationalizing that it was spread by the victim herself. Watching from inside the school, Miyu takes her leave, as the spirit has confirmed the safety of her friends. This is where the main story ends, but 3 additional chapters adapt their own respective endings. The first of these follows Route B3, showing Satoshi's parents concerned for the safety of their daughter. Forced to lie about what happened, the teen has no idea how to approach the disappearance of his sister. Going to his room, the brother is conflicted, debating whether or not he should say anything. Noticing the small box on his desk, Satoshi opens it up, finding a note that could have only been written by one person. Hearing someone knock on Yuka's door, the teen is shocked to say the least. Peering through the keyhole, the brother can see his sibling in some alternate dimension, though oddly, she isn't wearing any clothing. At the end of Route C, Satoshi's hall door opens, revealing Naomi. Here, we get a completely new development, as Yuka's door is now the one that opens. Wading through a pool of blood, Satoshi hugs his sister close, wanting to bring her back home. Instead, Yuka wants her brother to stay in this dimension, begging him not to leave. Still feeling guilty about what happened, Satoshi throws logic to the side, agreeing to the proposition. As the two embrace, the blood completely envelops them, preventing any means of escape. Back in the real world, Satoshi's body lies motionless, most likely dead as he forfeited his soul to Yuka. Pushing the original extra ending further, it's interesting to get some closure on where the bedroom door leads. With this in mind, a certain question is left unanswered. Was that actually Yuka, or was it the curse of the school coming to finish what it started? After all, Naomi was used in the same way to trick Satoshi during Route C. Bookmark this for now, as an unexpected extension of this is right around the corner. Walking home together, the penultimate chapter opens on Shinozaki presenting the same topics from Route D2. With Yoshiki now being the one fielding the strange questions, he can immediately tell that something is off. Going on to talk about resurrection, the young woman gets a crazed look in her eye. Thinking this discussion is getting out of hand, Yoshiki is verbally assaulted by his friend, wanting to revive the dead by any means necessary. Doing his best to calm her down, the young man invites the girl back to his place to properly talk about things. As he leaves to make the two some drinks, Shinozaki's gaze lands on the nearby desk. Mulling over the recent events, Yoshiki tries to figure out the best approach to defuse the situation. Deciding to wing it, the teen leaves the kitchen, returning to quite a sight. Sitting on the floor with her underwear off, Shinozaki is in the middle of violently stabbing her crotch with a pen. Slapping the object away, Yoshiki doesn't have a clue what's gotten into his friend. Reaching out to stop the girl, the young man grabs hold of her shirt, being pushed away as the world's thinnest fabric rips and leaves the aggressor topless. Claiming that she's punishing herself, Shinozaki is adamant on continuing the self-torture. The memories from when she was possessed came back, forcing her to remember the cruel way in which she mutilated Naomi. Grabbing a pair of scissors, the remorseful girl carves into more of her limbs, thinking she doesn't have the right to exist. While it's not exactly the same, a similar scene happens later in Blood Drive. Reminding the friend of her original goal to save everyone, Yoshiki resigns himself to helping, even though his inner thoughts don't quite line up with what he's saying. Thinking he's finally got his in with her, the young man is again left disappointed as Shinozaki brings up Satoshi. Not standing a chance against this infatuation, Yoshiki's romantic future is anything but bright. The final chapter is a brand new ending, starting right as Naomi arrives home. Recalling her time with Satoshi, the girl is thrilled to be on the same page as her love interest. As Naomi heads down the hall, her surroundings gradually become more sinister. Hearing a voice from behind, a certain someone makes another appearance. Naho claims that the girl's soul somehow managed to leave the Nexus through willpower alone, only to be called back for an important assignment. Not understanding what she means, Naomi is hit with a hard truth, but refuses to accept it. Seeing the remains of her body on the floor, the student retraces her steps, resulting in a harrowing revelation. Naomi never escaped the bathroom after saving Yuka, becoming another victim of the cursed school. Preventing the Nexus from closing, the girl was chosen as the new Sachiko, doomed to spend eternity in the alternate dimension. Not paying attention to the lewd initiation going on behind her, Naho gets ready to leave without a second thought. Turning back around, the paranormal expert bears witness to Naomi's rebirth. Weird sexual stuff aside, this chapter does an excellent job cementing how powerful the school's reach is. Both girls had their own lingering desires, but in the end, neither of them could escape the curse. At the very least, Yuka presumably escaped her circumstances, though it required a sacrifice to pull off. I have to say though, the Nexus itself forcing a replacement for Sachiko is actually kind of an awesome idea. Can you imagine the potential of Blood Drive if this part of the lore was incorporated into the main story? For instance, it's already tragic enough that Seiko can't escape her death in Heavenly Host. How do you think Naomi would react if she found out that her best friend became the next version of Sachiko? Despite what happened in Book of Shadows, it's likely that her desperation would surpass even Shinozaki's. The environment could also change accordingly. Blood Drive took Heavenly Host and either warped it into a fleshy mess or expanded it beyond recognition. Instead, if the new leader took charge, what if they personalized the Nexus, making it look like a rundown Kisaragi Academy? Bringing in more fresh victims, the welcoming environment would be forever tainted. Arriving in this seemingly familiar location, the friends who made it out initially would surely be dealt a heavy psychological blow. The finishing touch could involve the other main cast members who met their untimely demise. Replacing the original ghost children, the trio could be reintroduced as the next wave of mindless spirits wandering the halls. Watching the empty shells kill off other students, a completely different strategy would be necessary to deal with them. You don't need a new cast of characters, magic battles, or even a world-ending plot. I think the best thing you can do with this series is to keep the experience as intimate as possible between the surviving characters and the environment. I'm gonna wrap things up now so I don't go on too much of a tangent. Outside of the main story, there's also a side chapter that gives a little more focus to Miyu before the group gets transported. Taking place in gym class, the guys talk about her many charm points, riling themselves up as the discussion continues. Before they can call her lower region into question, the dialogue is interrupted by Satoshi. Noticing that his friend's outfit is currently see-through, the young man does his best to stave away the thirsty stares of the audience. Handing her a striped towel for cover, Satoshi is offered a reward for for his concern. Embarrassed, he runs away, leaving Miyu to question a certain preference. Taking this into consideration, she buys a new pair of underwear in hopes of appealing to her love interest. Trying them on, Miyu considers them to be a perfect fit in various ways. Returning to school the next day, she's brimming with confidence. Regrettably, certain future events will eventually bring everything crashing down around her. Beyond this, there's a prologue chapter, mostly showing events to come, but also containing some unused concept panels. With that, we've reached the end, showcasing just about everything to expect from Corpse Party's PC-98 entry. The original game made for a very charming experience, and I completely understand how a fanbase built up around it. While the manga adaptation is wildly different in terms of presentation, at its core lies a retelling that does a decent job breathing new life into the oldest entry of the series. Of course, the contents may prove to be too extreme for various fans, and I don't blame anyone for avoiding it. For a lot of readers, there's no doubt that the visuals end up distracting away from the story being told. A fair amount may have dropped it completely. It may not bother me, but the excessive nature of the fan service does feel unnecessary, especially given the series as a whole. Either way, it's entirely up to preference, and the creators made the project they wanted to. While it never received a Western localization, it's still available to read elsewhere for those who get curious. Musume may not be for everyone, but that's the risk that comes with personalizing horror. Special thanks to my awesome literary club members, Ultra Flow,